to a Catholic university that's funded by Catholics, teaching Catholic doctrine. Sad to say, there are very few such schools left in this country. I actually have been on almost 400 campuses and on many Catholic institutions where I am always told, universally, except at the Catholic University in Washington, that the Department of Theology is run by atheists. I have no objection if there was a University of Atheism, if it was a private institution. And I have no objection if, say, Amherst, which is a private school, were to rename itself the University of Marxism and teach Marxism. But I do have an objection if a university claims to honor the principles of academic freedom and claims to be a modern research university, if it indoctrinates students in a sectarian creed. And there are actually, since it's probably a fairly conservative audience, liberals. One in particular, Stanley Fish, has written a very important book called Save the World on Your Own Time, which is built around the principle that any subject is legitimate to be brought into a classroom if the purpose of bringing it into the classroom is to analyze it, dissect it, and look at it critically. But no idea is legitimate to be brought into the classroom if the purpose of the instructor is to recruit students to his or her sectarian agenda. And I have described in this book many courses, including 3 by Professor Cloud, but others as well, which do not do that. But the agenda is to recruit the students to the political views and agendas of the professor. This is a violation of students' academic freedom. It is a violation of democratic principles of education. And because there are millions of students passing through these courses every year, it is a threat to our democracy.
When are we going to take this?
The Women's Studies Department at this school, as at the other 5 schools that I have, 4 schools, the other 4 schools I visited this week, is dedicated to a sectarian doctrine. It is not about women. Of course, the study of women is a legitimate study. And let me say something else. The students who suffer the most from hearing only one side of the story, the students who suffer the most in a university where conservatives are ridiculed, are the liberal and left-wing students. There's a course, I can't remember if it was at this school or another school. Oh no, it was at the University of Arizona. A course by a professor named Carrie McBride on feminist theory, in which only radical feminist texts are assigned, of course. No critics, no Camille Paglia, no Christina Haas Summers, no Daphne Katay, all of whom are feminists, but they're not left-wing feminists. No assignments like that, but the students are required to read Wage, Labor, and Capital by Karl Marx, which was wrong in its own day, and is certainly wrong 150 years later, unless you are a very religious, fanatic ideologue, which this woman is. And I was criticized because it said, well, this was just an introduction to Marx. You have to ask yourself what Marx is doing anyway in a 21st century study of women, but that's okay. That's the professor's choice. But if you know, when I picked up the introduction, it's only about 3 or 4 paragraphs. There are statements in it. The major modification of Marxism was by Louis Althusser. And the only other Marxist mentioned is Antonio Gramsci. Well, as somebody who's written books about Marxism and has spent a quarter of a century studying Marxism, I can tell you that Louis Althusser is a particular kind of Marxist. He was a member of the French Communist Party. He was somewhat deranged. He ended up strangling his wife and spent his last years in a mental institution. But by no stretch of the imagination is he the Marxist, the only or the main modifier of Marxism. If you teach Marxism in a university as though it were Newtonian physics, you are indoctrinating students, which is what this woman was doing. The study of women is a proper study. The training of radical feminists is not proper to a university. It'd be proper in, the International Socialist Organization. If they want to have a course in feminism, that's fine with me. This is a state university dedicated to modern educational principles in most of its parts, but certainly not in this one. Women's studies teaches instills two doctrines. One is the social construction of gender. We have students here. How many of you have been told that gender is socially constructed? For the senior citizens like myself here, so the social construction of gender means that the differences between men and women that we describe as masculine and feminine, the gender differences, are man-made. And the reason that this is an important theory for radical feminists is because it undergirds the theory that we live in a patriarchy, and that men construct the feminine gender, since males are dominant, in order to better and more easily oppress women. So that there's an entire political agenda in this theory. Now, if you think about it for a second, you'll see that this is the old nurture versus nature argument. Whether environment, whether society determines, in this case, character, or whether biology might have a role. If you move from the women's studies, is it a department here, or maybe just a program? That's a department. Too bad. Okay, it's probably called the Women and Gender something department. Center, thank you, whatever. If you move from this Women's Studies Center and go over to the biology department or the neuroscience department here, if you are a student, I don't know if any of you are, you do that, you will find that there is a wealth, a plenitude of empirical data that shows that gender is hardwired. It's part of the genome. It's biologically based. So you might be interested how the Stalinists and the American Association of University Professors, like my friend Gary Nelson, how they deal with this. How do you defend this? Well, they defend it by redefining it. They say it's not indoctrination if it's held to be a truth within the field. So a completely, along with this doctrine of the social construction of gender, of course, there's the social construction of race. Everything is socially constructed. I'll explain why in a second. Along with this goes the notion of race, class, and gender hierarchies. And every women's studies department does not, of course, stay with women. It's always race, class, and gender hierarchies.